Joe. Hey guys, I'm Joe, and today I'm here to do yet another Star Wars video. I know, you're gonna say that, oh, you're saturated with Star Wars, blah, 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 blah. I can't promise that this is gonna be the last Star Wars video. That's not gonna happen. And I usually don't like to rank movies because that's really hard for me to figure out, like, where exactly something fits on my list. And everybody does these ranking lists, so it's nothing new. But hopefully, with my opinions and my perspective, I can make it somewhat more unique and original for people. Because my list is more than likely gonna piss people off. Whether or not you agree with me, that's totally cool. And it's Star Wars, probably the most divisive movie series that's ever been made. And rankings can be kind of fun. And also, if you still haven't seen Rise of Skywalker, there's gonna be spoilers for not just that movie, but for all the movies that are on here. So I would stop the video if you don't want to know anything. But if you have seen it, or you just don't care about spoilers, feel free to stick around. Let's try to have some fun here with Star Wars because, you know, amidst all the negativity in the fandom, there's still a lot of fun you can have with this franchise. There's a lot of great stuff to talk about, and there's a lot of bad stuff. This is gonna be a long video, so fasten your seatbelts. Now keep in mind that despite my ranking and my overall verdict on each Star Wars movie, I do own all of them on Blu-ray, and it boils down to the fact that even if the movie is really bad, there's at least one aspect or one moment or one scene or one line where I can say, okay, cool, that's fine. And plus, it's part of the broader scope of the Star Wars universe. Each film in the saga, and even the spin-off movies, are very relevant to each other, just like Breaking Bad. That episode of Season 1 is relevant to Season 5. So starting off at number 11 for me, and I think some of you would agree with me, Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. Where do I even begin with this movie? Yes, there are good parts to this movie. Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, I think, is probably the one consistent thing throughout this prequel trilogy. Him and John Williams' musical score, which I like the ending music that plays before the credits, such as this moment. He's probably the only actor / character in this movie that actually acts like a human being. Whenever it cuts back to Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm actually somewhat interested in what's happening. Him chasing Jango Fett, learning about the clone army on Kamino. Sorry, Master, I forgot you don't like flying. I don't mind flying, but what you're doing is suicide! I also like this scene.
Oh, not good.
And this moment.
I hate it when he does that.
And also the scene where he does the mind trick on that one guy who tries to sell him death sticks. You don't want to sell me death sticks. I don't want to sell you death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life. I want to go home and rethink my life. And then there's the moment where Anakin reunites with his mother right before she dies, and he gets to have one last moment with her. Then the moment where he lashes out on the Sand People, even though it's cut really short. And then when he brings back her dead body to the Lars homestead. It does a good job of conveying the pain of Anakin's loss. And that aspect, George Lucas did really well. I like some of the back and forth between Yoda and Count Dooku, and Obi-Wan and Count Dooku. I like seeing the Jedi in the arena, even though it comes off really flashy and style over substance. And there are some nice location shots, such as Anakin standing on the balcony of Naboo, and the shot of the Sandcrawler where he's talking to the one Jawa trying to find his mom. Other than that, this movie is, well, it's pretty bad. It's not good. I'm sorry, guys, but it's not good. Any bad thing that I could say about this movie has already been said by now, but I'm gonna try to sum it up as much as I can anyway. The acting is really flat, except for Ewan McGregor. The dialogue is poorly written. The production design and CGI looks really dated and just really fake, like it was pulled out of a PlayStation 2 game. It just doesn't look real. It just looks like it was fabricated. Most of the time, everyone has this I don't care look on their face, and it's more than likely because they're standing by a blue screen or a green screen. Yoda bouncing around with a lightsaber, I have a love-hate relationship with that. And a lot of people said it contradicts what he said to Luke in Empire, that it's not about your lightsaber, not this crude matter right here. It's not about your lightsaber, it's about here and here. Yeah, that's more or less what he said, but he didn't necessarily say in Empire that he didn't need to use a lightsaber to prove himself as a Jedi. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall him saying that to Luke on Dagobah. To a point, I'm okay with him using the lightsaber if he feels like he has to use it. If he just had a moment where he was like, I guess we'll have to do this the hard way. And him flipping around, doing barrel rolls, bouncing off the walls, it doesn't always work. And then there's the romance between Anakin and Padme. Do I even have to make fun of this? It's so forced, so flat, there is no chemistry between the two. And Hayden Christensen, I feel so bad for saying this. I've seen him act in other things, and he's actually not that bad of an actor when he's given a decent script to work with. And I've heard he's a good actor in other movies. Now, I can't name him off the top of my head, but I can't necessarily blame him. It was just George Lucas being like, yeah, do it however you want to do it. Go faster, more quicker. And this movie does try to portray Anakin going further and further towards the dark side, but instead of getting the impression that he's becoming a cold and calculating militaristic leader, he is more or less on the path of being a serial killer. I don't really care about Anakin that much, except for maybe when he loses his mother, but other than that, when he's pouring out his heart to Padme, oh my god, it's so bad. Not to mention that Padme is wearing all these revealing dresses. She is asking for it from Anakin. Why are you wearing that if you don't want to date the guy? I don't have anything else much to say about Attack of the Clones. It is by far the worst Star Wars movie for me. As a movie, I would say it's not really good, but as a Star Wars movie, yeah, it's pretty bad. But I'll admit, every once in a while I do like to watch some certain scenes from it. If people out there like it, more power to you, but it doesn't do it for me. At number 10, we have The Phantom Menace. This, I would say, is a little bit more tolerable than Attack of the Clones because there's no god-awful romance in here. Boring, flat, and uninteresting movie. Not a whole lot of stuff happens in here. You've heard it all before. It's bogged down in politics, trade negotiations, and peace treaty signings. Between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace, everybody was so excited to see the beginning of Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader, how things came to be the way they were, and we got some of that stuff in there. Again, like with Attack of the Clones, there are some entertaining aspects to it. The Duel of the Fates theme, I even have that on my phone, and every once in a while I like to listen to it while I'm on the highway, which is an extremely dangerous thing to do. Kids, do not try this at home. The Darth Maul lightsaber fight, that's awesome. One of the best lightsaber duels in the franchise by far. Ray Park does a great job with what he's given to do. He looks cool, he has a neat design, he has a double-sided lightsaber, but he doesn't really have any lines, except for, "At last we reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge. If my traces were correct, I will find them quickly, Master." He barely has anything to say written by George Lucas. Major plus for a character in this movie. The pod racing scene is not bad. It has some entertaining moments, but I think the best scene in the movie for me is when Anakin has to say goodbye to his mother. He's dreamt of being a Jedi, he wants to go out there and be a pilot and see all the star systems in the universe, but then he realizes he has to leave his mom behind, and being 9 years old, having your mom in your life as the only parent that you have, I don't think any kid would be able to stomach that. Just like in Attack of the Clones with Anakin's mom dying, George Lucas did a great job with this aspect of the movie where he conveys the emotion of Anakin having to leave his mother behind. Look, I know a lot of people have given Jake Lloyd a lot of crap over the years, and I don't really think it's fair, but in that scene, I think he really sold it. And there's some nice location shooting on Tatooine when they're in the desert. As opposed to the last two prequels, George Lucas, I think, made somewhat more of an effort to film scenes in some real locations. The rest of the movie, though, definitely feels like it's on a blue screen, and the CGI, again, looks really dated. Just like with the other two prequels, the dialogue is very flat, poorly written, and the actors are so monotone and bland. The sense of adventure is lost from the original trilogy. Doesn't mean it has to be the original trilogy to a T, not necessarily. Say what you will about the sequel trilogy, but at least it captured the spirit and fun and entertainment value that the original trilogy had. The prequel trilogy didn't have any of those things. Well, in moments they had them. This movie has some of that, but the bickering, the back and forth between the characters, like, there's none of that with Obi-Wan or Qui-Gon or Padme. You don't get any of those things, and there's no main character in here. You could say that Qui-Gon is the main character because of Liam Neeson. Wouldn't you want to make Obi-Wan the main character? Anakin's not introduced until like 45 minutes into the movie, and Ewan McGregor does fine with what he's given. He does better in the other two prequels, but he's wasted here. Liam Neeson, fantastic actor, but I don't care about Qui-Gon. All we've seen him do is show some faith in Anakin because he has a high midichlorian count, which is one of the stupidest things that George Lucas made up in his mind. Pleading with the Jedi Council that Anakin's the chosen one, and then he's killed by Darth Maul. I don't care. I don't like Qui-Gon. He's basically a pointless character, which is a real bummer because Liam Neeson's a fantastic actor, and Jake Lloyd, he did not deserve any of the hate that he's gotten in the last 20 years. He was only a kid. He just did what he was told to do. That being said though, his performance, minus that scene with his mother that I talked about earlier, I hate to say this, but he's pretty awful in this movie, and I don't really know who's to blame for that, whether it's George Lucas's writing or their direction or the actors just kind of half-assing it just because they don't really have much of a director-actor relationship to go off of. And then, of course, there's Jar Jar. Any negative thing that you could say about this character has been said already. All in all, The Phantom Menace has some entertaining scenes, but as a Star Wars movie, it's not good. It's slightly better and more tolerable than Attack of the Clones is, but not by much. And in comparison to what the original trilogy was beforehand, it fails miserably. Again, if any one of you out there like it, more power to you. It's not something I would watch on a regular basis. At number 9, this is a pretty controversial one. Is Rogue One a Star Wars story?
Blasphemer!
Again, there's a lot of good parts in here. The production design, the visual effects, minus Governor Tarkin. It looks and feels just exactly like the original films. And there is a good story in there. A group of misfits that are put together in order to find the plans of the Death Star and get it to the Rebel Alliance. A prequel to A New Hope, which we all know how it's gonna go down. But going into it, I thought if it's like Saving Private Ryan, maybe it could actually be engaging. The first half really drags the movie down. I don't really find the characters that interesting. Instead of like being in there with them in the group, I feel like I'm watching it from a distance, seeing all this stuff happen. You don't really know a whole lot about them. There's really no distinct personality traits that you get from them, except for maybe Donnie Yen's character. K2SO is an entertaining character, but he doesn't really stick out. Jyn Erso, she is so hollow and bland. The time jump between when she loses her mother as a kid to when we see her now in the present timeline as an outcast, so much happened in that time jump that we don't really get to hear or see what exactly happened. Now, do I want to be spoon-fed? No, but some clarity would have sufficed. Just some. And with Cassian Andor, his character backstory basically sums up my problem with the characters. I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. You're not the only one who's lost everything. What happened when you were 6? What happened? That's all we're told. We're never given anything. Never. Governor Tarkin's look, really off and distracting. But if you want to know more of my thoughts on that, you could just go watch my review. I'm just giving you the highlights. But like I said, there are good things in this movie. The space battle is the best one that we've seen since Return of the Jedi. The battle on Scarif is really entertaining, and the Darth Vader scenes, even though there's 2, are really exciting. Especially that one scene where he's killing all the rebels in the hallway. And this movie relies on a heavy dose of fan service. Yet people complained about that in The Force Awakens. Rogue One has its moments, but it's a really flat and really hollow and just not that good of a movie. The love that this movie has gotten is completely baffling to me, and I will never understand it. At number 8, we are at Revenge of the Sith, which I think most people would consider to be the best installment in the prequel trilogy. I'm one of those people. I think that Revenge of the Sith is slightly underrated and underappreciated. It has a lot of the similar problems that the previous 2 prequels had, and some of the flaws people have with it, like Palpatine coming up with Vader's name. You shall be known as Darth Vader. It makes me shiver with joy a little bit, but at the same time it's like, why did you name him Vader? There's really no reasoning behind it. It just happens. Then Padme dying of a broken heart. Oh my god. Then there's this. And the lightsaber fight between Palpatine and Mace Windu. It's entertaining to some degree, but when Ian McDiarmid is making these stabbing motions with the lightsaber, he's making all these weird faces like, pretty laughable, actually. It's like, dude, what are you doing? And some of Hayden Christensen's line delivery is still pretty bad. You turned her against me? You wanna take her from me? That being said, though, he actually does somewhat of a better job in this one, and you actually do kind of feel for the fall of Anakin. He's starting to get visions of Padme dying, just like he did with his mother, so he's desperate to try to figure out a way to stop her from dying, all because Palpatine created these visions in order to seduce him to the darkness. Ian McDiarmid is probably the best part of this whole movie. The way he tells the story about Darth Plagueis, which feeds into his return in The Rise of Skywalker, where he says, the dark side is the pathway to many abilities people consider unnatural. Now, having seen The Rise of Skywalker, it lets you know that, oh, wait a minute, he was actually planning a way to come back all along, even though they should have explained it a little more, but I digress. And his lightsaber duel with Yoda, even though I kind of don't like Yoda using a lightsaber, in that instance, I thought it made a lot more sense because it was the most powerful Sith Lord versus arguably the best Jedi in the galaxy, fighting against each other. It wouldn't have really worked had Obi-Wan decided to fight the Emperor because as powerful as he is, the Emperor really would have just walked all over him. So in that regard, I think George Lucas had the better idea. The Order 66 sequence is emotionally powerful. Anakin being masked as Darth Vader. I still remember the day I saw this, like the whole theater was just in complete awe when he rose up and John Williams' music is going, ah, da, da. To this day, it still makes me go, ah. And the ending of Revenge of the Sith is the perfect little bow of leading us into the original trilogy. I gotta admit, it chokes me up. And especially in the scene where Obi-Wan says, "You were the chosen one!"
You were my brother, Anakin! I loved you!
That scene, I think, is a pretty clear indicator that I think George Lucas finally realized, okay, I really dropped the ball with the last two. I gotta try to salvage something out of this. I think to a certain degree he did. Still has a lot of the problems that the previous two prequels had, but overall, I think Revenge of the Sith is definitely one of the more slightly underrated Star Wars movies. Not great, but not bad either. I would say at the very most, it's watchable. I could sit down and watch it if I wanted to. At number 7, The Last Jedi. The most controversial Star Wars movie, even more so than the prequel trilogy, I would say. I don't love The Last Jedi, which, if you guys want to know my thoughts, you can go watch my review of it. There's a lot of good in here, and there's a lot of not so good in here. Having seen The Rise of Skywalker, it doesn't nearly hurt as much anymore. I'll try to sum my thoughts up as best as I can here, but this basically feels like an alternate first act. It's like Rian Johnson came in and said, no, I don't like any of that stuff. I'm gonna hit the reboot button, and I'm gonna set it up this way. And yeah, I know, a lot of people are gonna say, they should have done this, they should have done that, they should have had a plan, should. Listen, guys, no matter how many times you say that, it's not gonna change what happened. The damage is done.
Let it go.
We're talking about what is, not what it should have been, and not what it could have been. Keep that in mind as I talk about the other two movies in the trilogy. As I said, this movie is probably the most polarizing Star Wars movie that we've ever had. A lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it. I don't necessarily hate this movie, but there's a lot of things in here that just make me go, Ryan, was that really necessary? The Canto Bight sequence, as many people have said, is really rough to sit through. Truth be told, I've come to really hate that sequence. Every time I watch The Last Jedi, I skip through those scenes and the movie improves a great deal. The whole aspect of the animal cruelty thing, I'm not against that stuff, and if you want to tell that in a Star Wars movie, okay, fine. But go do it over there. This is not the time to be experimenting with your own personal lovey-dovey feelings of Star Wars, Ryan. You have to go with the flow. You have to honor what was set up. And the fact that he put Finn on this adventure, it basically threw all the potential that Finn had out the window. He's basically reduced to a buffoon until he faces off against Captain Phasma, which I do actually like that he stands up to her finally. And then he tries to go out in a blaze of glory until Rose Tico comes in and saves him and kisses him, which, ugh. God. I find Admiral Holdo very flat. Laura Dern is fine, but she's not really given a whole lot to do. And I think what they should have done was have moments of doubt where she says, should I tell Poe about my plan? No, I gotta stick to the mission. But I could tell him though, could I? I don't know. I didn't really care if Snoke died or not, but I think it was a really stupid move considering that they were setting him up to be the big bad guy. Rey's parents being a nobody, I find very anticlimactic and just honestly feels very cheated. Like, this is what we waited 2 years for? After you set up the possibility of her being related to somebody important? All that mystery of her backstory? Actually, that doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. She's just a nobody. Surprise! Well, that's not exciting. Shifting over to the good parts, I do like the dynamic between Kylo Ren and Rey. Them seeing each other through the Force, seeing where they're at, communicating with each other. Her discussing with Luke whether or not the Jedi should end. Yoda teaching Luke that failure is the greatest teacher. One of the best scenes in the saga, in my opinion at least. And yes, guys, I like what they did with Luke. I know a lot of people don't, but for me it made perfect sense. He failed as an uncle, as a brother, and as a Jedi, and as a legend, Luke Skywalker. He was hailed as a hero of the rebellion and for the Jedi, and he rebuilt the Jedi Order, and here is his young nephew who's got the similar power that he had and that his grandfather had. And now he sees a potential to make him a powerful Jedi. Unfortunately, This dark Sith Lord, Supreme Leader Snoke, gets inside his head and brings out the darkness in him that he inherited from his grandfather. Then there's people who say, I don't buy that Luke would actually decide to kill his nephew like that. He would never do that. It completely ruins his character. Nah. Do you remember Return of the Jedi when Vader was taunting him about turning his sister to the darkness and he lost his temper and raged out on him? This is not the first time that Luke has let his emotions get the better of him. Give it half a second's thought here. Luke was the only Jedi that was left besides Obi-Wan and Yoda in the galaxy in the original trilogy. So all the pressure was put on his shoulders to rebuild the Jedi. After being looked at as a hero by the galaxy and seeing that he could possibly have to deal with another Darth Vader, history repeating itself, it scared him. And in a moment he thought he could end it. And as he says, it passed like a fleeting shadow. And I was left with shame and consequence. It doesn't necessarily negate what he learned in the original trilogy for me. It means that he's a human being. And I think as time goes on, people are going to look back on Luke's character journey and be like, actually, that wasn't too bad. Will they love it? Well, I don't know. That's really hard to say. But I think for me, I don't think it's going to be hated nearly as much. Overall, Star Wars The Last Jedi is a very conflicting movie. It has some really good parts, and it has some not so good parts. But I don't think it's the masterpiece nor disaster that people have said it is. At number 6, we've got Solo, a Star Wars story. All the production problems, all the changing of filmmakers and so on, it actually led to a fairly entertaining Star Wars movie for me. I still don't think that we needed a Han Solo movie in the first place. I think it would have been better if it was a Disney Plus series. That being said though, I did fairly enjoy this movie. I like it a little bit better than The Last Jedi because it doesn't try to break the formula that Rian Johnson tried to do. Yes, it's very safe, and there's not a whole lot of stuff that surprises you, but there's 2 moments that actually caught me off guard, such as Chewie meeting Han for the first time. I really liked how they played that out, and Darth Maul showing up at the very end. That was pretty surprising. And in fact, he should have been the villain for the entire movie because Paul Bettany's character didn't really work for me. And I said this in my review, but until Darth Maul turned the lightsaber on, I thought, this is actually refreshing. Solo's the first Star Wars movie to not have a lightsaber in it. But then when he turned it on, I went, I spoke too soon. I shouldn't have said that. The production design, the visual effects, like with the other Star Wars movies as of late, it looks really solid. Donald Glover as Lando I think is awesome. He gets the voice and the mannerisms down perfectly. Alden Ehrenreich is quite a good choice for Han Solo. Definitely no Harrison Ford, but thankfully he doesn't try to do an impression. L3 on the other hand, she did not need to be in the movie. Although, it does make sense in Empire Strikes Back when 3PO says, I don't know where you're shipped to learn to communicate, but it has the most peculiar dialect. It does add some things to the other films, as well as the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs.
Not if you round down, buddy.
There's really not a whole lot to talk about with this movie. It didn't really need to be made, but, you know, I think it's perfectly harmless. And every once in a while I do like watching it. And from the directing standpoint, I think Ron Howard did just fine. Now at number 5, yeah, we're in the top 5 now, and you're probably going to be shocked by this. Well, probably not. It is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Still a very messy movie. The first 20 minutes are a lot to get through. Didn't bother me nearly as much as it did the first 2 times, but it's still a lot that they throw at you. And J.J. Abrams was making up for lost time, and had he done Episode 8, it's basically what he would have done. And considering what The Last Jedi did, that's not really surprising. But they should have done this. Yeah, they should have. But they should have had a plan. Yeah, they should have. But they should have done this. Yeah, they should have. But we should have done it. Yeah, we should have. But we didn't. We tripped on the 4-yard line. We didn't get the ball in the end zone. We won by a field goal. If you ask me, it's better than ending on a draw, and it's certainly better than losing. Again, you can watch my review of it. It's more or less the same how I feel right now. Kylo Ren is explored pretty deeply in here. I like the way they redeemed him. It's not done in a way where he's hailed as a hero because of after everything that he's done, like killing Han Solo, slaughtering all the people that he's killed, and all the other stuff that he's done, and being looked at as the supreme leader of the First Order. It would have been really weird had they made him a hero because, like I said, after everything he did. The way they played his redemption in a very quiet moment where he heals Rey in an act of sacrifice, I thought it was a nice little touch. And despite Rey being underwritten overall in the trilogy, I still quite like her, and I find her a very fascinating character. And her being related to Palpatine, while it does kind of feel out of left field, and I think they should have revealed that in The Last Jedi, it does explain at least why she's so powerful. And the hints of her backstory being a big secret in The Force Awakens, it makes more sense now. Although I wish we could have gotten more with her parents, like with her father supposedly being the son of Palpatine. How exactly does that fit in the timeline? But I'm sure it'll wind up in a book or comic. Leia's role in here, I think that was a very classy thing that they did, and the way they ended her character, having her pass away in front of R2-D2, perfect full circle moment. It got me a little bit, especially when Kylo Ren has that vision of Han Solo. Dad? I know. Whether or not you like the movie, you can't deny that that scene was pretty powerful. It was great seeing Billy D. Williams back as Lando. And there's too much fan service! Listen, this is the finale of the saga. If you're gonna have fan service in here, this is the movie to do it in. The Emperor's inclusion, I accepted it. Still doesn't entirely work for me, and the people who say that it undermines Anakin's arc and sacrifice in Return of the Jedi saying, "That's stupid, he's back from the dead, he's alive, he didn't do anything. Now Rey's the chosen one." No. Rey is not the chosen one. Nobody ever said she was the chosen one. They never even alluded to it. Not in this movie, not in The Last Jedi, and certainly not in The Force Awakens. Anakin still killed Palpatine. Unfortunately, in Revenge of the Sith, as I mentioned earlier, he was already looking for a way to come back from the dead if he had to. And he's technically not back in this movie. Yes, he is back in a sense, but he's on the verge of coming back. And do I still believe that Palpatine was the plan from the beginning? No. Snoke was the baddie, 100%. Again, considering what The Last Jedi did to the trilogy, it's not really surprising. So J.J. Abrams is not going to introduce something that we'd never heard of because we're not emotionally attached to it. And we basically be repeating the same thing that the prequel trilogy did. So what does he do? He falls back on what we know. And also, when Rey reaches out to the Jedis of the past, you hear Anakin say, "Bring back the balance," as I did. Anakin still fulfilled the prophecy. Had he not left to become a Jedi, he wouldn't have married Padme, they wouldn't have had Luke and Leia, Leia would not have given birth to Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, who later came in and assisted Rey in defeating the Emperor. And also, had he not become a Jedi, we wouldn't have seen the lightsaber end up in Luke's possession, it wouldn't have ended up in Rey's possession, she wouldn't have been able to use it to defeat the Emperor once and for all. It all begins and ends with Anakin, and her taking on the Skywalker name to honor his memory and Luke's memory and Leia's. It all starts and ends with Anakin. He is still the chosen one. Rey is not, I repeat, is not the chosen one. So please explain to me where in this movie and the other two in the trilogy that Rey's the chosen one. I would love to hear it. I like how they address that Finn is Force sensitive, which explains why he was able to use the lightsaber in Force Awakens. Poe Dameron is given a little bit more to do, given a little bit of backstory that he was a spice runner with Zori Bliss. Kylo Ren and Rey seeing each other through the Force plane and fighting each other with the objects going through their environments one to the other. That was a really neat thing to see. Babu Frick or whatever his name is, that guy was freaking hilarious. 3PO's sacrifice? That I found pretty touching. My favorite scene in the whole movie is when Luke's Force Ghost shows up and gives wisdom to Rey, and when he catches the lightsaber, it signifies his arc from the end of The Last Jedi, and it's also a knock against Rian Johnson. A Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. Despite the messy script, I actually really have come to really like The Rise of Skywalker. If you don't like it, I totally understand. If you love it, I get that. The consensus is still all over the place. I can't really predict where it's going to land in the future, although I think it's going to be viewed a little bit more positively. We'll see in the next 10 or 20 years. But all in all, I really do enjoy The Rise of Skywalker. Now at number 4, we have to go back to the beginning. A New Hope. I know it wasn't called A New Hope when it came out in '77, but I actually like the title A New Hope. I think it really signifies the overall story and character journeys that these people go through. Luke is the new hope for the Jedi, and the rest of the gang, like Han, Leia, Chewie, R2, and 3PO, they're the new hope for the Rebel Alliance and the galaxy. I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't already know about this movie. The effects, they still hold up masterfully to this day. The opening scene where the Tantive 4 is trying to get away from the Star Destroyer is one of the most jaw-dropping scenes, and so iconic that it's basically indescribable. Just watch the scene for yourself. The Death Star attack is really entertaining, as well as the TIE fighters attacking the Falcon. The banter and back and forth between Han and Leia and Luke is really entertaining. Look, your worshipfulness, let's get one thing straight. I take orders from just one person, me. It's a wonder you're still alive. Will somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way? No reward is worth this. Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan Kenobi is absolutely solid. And through him, the movie does a really good job of explaining this world and the Jedi, the Force. Luke Skywalker is still one of the most endearing protagonists that has ever been put to film. Mark Hamill does a fantastic job. The score by John Williams, including the Binary Sunset theme, which is probably my favorite scene in the whole film. Everything about A New Hope works for me. And my next choice is probably going to upset some of you guys, just like what I did with Rogue One, but at number 3 is The Empire Strikes Back. Oh, shut up! Go make your own list if you don't like it. Obviously, this is the fan favorite and overall considered as the best Star Wars movie. I don't disagree with that. I don't. My big problem, though, is whenever it cuts between Han and Leia on the asteroid and to Luke and Yoda, I think the movie drags just a little bit. Not too much, but it does kind of drag a little bit, and I find it a little bit hard to sit through. I remember as a kid fast-forwarding through those scenes because I just wanted to get to the action. Now I appreciate it more as an adult, but it does kind of meander a little bit for me. Like with A New Hope, I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't already know about this movie. It expands on the characters, taking them to more dark and interesting places, Luke's potential being tested as a Jedi, Yoda putting him through all these difficult trials, him discovering that Vader's his father, which as far as I'm concerned is the best twist in cinematic history, and I think most people would agree with that. Han being frozen in carbonite and him saying I know before it happens, the asteroid scene, the Battle of Hoth, the Imperial March being one of the most iconic musical pieces in film history, Billy D. Williams as Lando, hello, what have we here? And the lightsaber duel between Luke and Vader, just absolutely perfect. Yeah, not much else I can say about Empire Strikes Back. It's a terrific movie. Enough said. Number 2. This is tied with my other favorite Star Wars movie, but it's my favorite of the original trilogy, and it always has been, and that's Return of the Jedi. Now you're probably wondering, why do you like the last chapter in the trilogy? That's because I like a good ending to any series. The Dark Knight Rises, Deathly Hallows Part 2, and now Avengers Endgame. This just wraps everything up in a nice little bow. The Endor space battle is probably the best space battle that we've seen in the franchise. Seeing Luke more fully trained as a Jedi, taking out all the guys above the Sarlacc pit, us finding out that Luke and Leia are siblings, which kind of came in at the last second creatively, but still, this is a great scene. The final duel between Luke and Vader is just riveting beyond words. The Emperor taunting Luke, trying to get him to turn to the darkness, and the scene where Vader is redeemed and throwing the Emperor down the chute, saving his son, and him also looking back and forth to the camera and back to Luke. You can tell that he's conflicted in that moment, even though he's wearing a mask, and his eventual death chokes me up every time. And I know a lot of people don't like the Ewoks. Me, I'm okay with them. A little too cutesy and cuddly for some people's liking. Yeah, them trying to cook 3 main characters above the fire, that's a little too much. But they do serve a purpose in the climactic battle, so they're not completely pointless. Despite some nitpicks that I have with it, Return of the Jedi I think is one of the best finales that we've ever seen in the series. Well, at least until Force Awakens reopened the door. But it's up there for me with some of the best conclusions to any series that we've ever seen, with Endgame, Deathly Hallows Part 2, and The Dark Knight Rises. But as much as I love it, it's not even going to come close to number 1, The Force Awakens. I've done like at least 2 or 3 reviews of this movie. In fact, I did quite a few trailer reactions. The first one that I ever did for the first teaser trailer, it sounds awful, it looks awful, and even I look awful. God. The hype leading up to this movie's release was exciting beyond words. The prequels had their moments, but in comparison to the original trilogy, not so great. This movie, real acting, real location shooting, excitement, and interesting characters? Something we hadn't seen in a Star Wars movie in quite a long time. Despite what people say about this being a remake of A New Hope, it's not, by the way. This movie does an excellent job of sucking you back into the Star Wars universe, almost like it's saying, this is the Star Wars that you remember. It's a familiar adventure, but it's not the same story. We have a map that could lead us to Luke Skywalker. Rey does not have a family to go back to like Luke does. A stormtrooper turned good guy? We hadn't seen that before in the franchise. A dark side Force user who's struggling against the light instead of the darkness? That hadn't been done before. Darth Vader was the opposite of that. The character dynamics, it still gets me. Again, if you want to know my full thoughts, you can just watch my video. Just about everything in this movie works for me. Millennium Falcon being chased on Jakku, one of the best action sequences in the franchise by far. Rey longing to meet her parents again, Maz Kanata telling her that the belonging you seek is ahead, not behind you. Perfect modernization and retelling of the monomyth. The protagonist who longs for something better than what he or she has. And a lot of people complained at the time that Rey was too overpowered. Obviously, having seen The Rise of Skywalker, it makes a lot more sense considering who she's related to. But there are some moments where it's like, that was a little too easy. But both times that she runs into Kylo Ren in the woods, watch closely. She actually runs away from him after seeing how powerful he is. Especially in the moment where she uses the mind trick on the stormtrooper after like the 3rd try. She doesn't do it on the 1st try, guys. And after 3 tries of shooting the stormtrooper, she's clearly shocked by what she's able to do. She's not one of those characters that's like, oh, I'm magical, I'm powerful, I can do all these things, I'm so amazing. No, she was definitely learning, and she was shocked by what she was doing. And as far as the similarities to A New Hope, you can watch my review of it, but for me, it's done in a way of getting you back into this new trilogy. And Harrison Ford as Han Solo, absolutely amazing. And the scene where he is killed by his son, oh man. To anyone who says that it's just a rehash of Ben Kenobi's death, my answer to that is, okay, Is it contrived just so they could redo Ben Kenobi's death, or does it make sense for the characters of Ben Solo and Han Solo? There's a lot more depth in that scene than people realize. Han Solo failed as a father. He's not sure if he can reach his son, but he tries to do it anyway because as a father, as a parent, I think that deep down you want to believe that your child's a good person. You don't want to believe that they're completely evil. And I think it makes sense for Han Solo to go out there and try to appeal to his son. And the final scene with Rey holding out the lightsaber to Luke Skywalker, perfect ending that makes us want to come back for the next one. Make no mistake about this. Despite what people say about this movie and the sequel trilogy, I love The Force Awakens. I think it is the best Star Wars movie that we've had since the original trilogy, and I will die on that hill. You want to force choke me for that? Be my guest. So that's my ranking of the Star Wars movies. Thank you guys so much for watching and for putting up with my controversial opinions. Hopefully you guys had fun watching this just as much as I did making it. If you want to tell me what your rankings are of the Star Wars movies, just comment below and tell me what they are. I'll see you all very soon, and may the Force be with you.